Ibrahim Traoré sat in quiet reflection as the news unfolded. Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, had just declassified documents that pointed a sharp finger at the Obama-era officials. Her claim, that U.S. intelligence had been twisted, manipulated, and politicized to set the stage for an FBI investigation against Donald Trump. To many, it was just another headline in America's endless political theater. But to Traoré it was something far more disturbing, something he had seen before. He had seen it in Africa, where colonial administrators built intelligence networks not to protect people, but to suppress them. He had seen it in Europe, where empires dressed in suits once criminalized dissent through files, codes, and whispered surveillance. He had seen it in Asia, where opposition voices vanished beneath national security justifications. And now he was seeing it in the so-called free world. To him, this wasn't just an American scandal, it was a global warning. A mirror held up to every capital on earth. Politics, he believed, was being stripped of its duty and turned into a battlefield, where strategy replaced service and revenge replaced responsibility. Traoré knew what happened when intelligence stopped being a tool for national defense and became a weapon for personal survival. He had watched public offices mutate into private arsenals, where justice was no longer blind but simply obedient. And now, the world's most powerful democracy appeared to be playing by the same dangerous rules. This moment for Traoré wasn't about Trump or Obama, left or right. It was about what happens when truth becomes negotiable. When institutions built to protect the people begin to protect power instead. He understood the consequences, because his own people had lived them. So, as the documents circulated and the headlines buzzed, Traoré didn't gloat. He didn't judge. He simply watched. And remembered. Because history, he knew, always repeats itself, especially when no one is willing to confront the first lie. As the news spread, reactions from global leaders were muted, cautious. But Ibrahim Traoré watched closely. Not for what was said but for what was not. He saw the silence of those who once lectured African nations about transparency and democratic values. He remembered the stern faces from Western embassies, the conditional aid packages tied to good governance, the speeches about justice. But now their own house was cracking. The documents Tulsi Gabbard released weren't just paper, they were confessions without apology. They showed how intelligence was bent, reshaped to fit a political narrative. They revealed meetings, emails, and edits, not made in the interest of peace but in the heat of rivalry. And through it all, no one was being held accountable. Only louder. In Burkina Faso, Traoré had fought his own battle against a system built on manipulation. He knew the cost of challenging the entrenched. He had seen men use national security to silence journalists. He had witnessed files disappear, names erased, elections rigged, all in the name of stability. And now in Washington he saw echoes of the same behavior. He shook his head not in condemnation but in understanding. Because once you use power to protect yourself instead of the people, the line between democracy and dictatorship fades fast. Still, he knew this wasn't just about America. It was about a global pattern, a disease that had infected both North and South, rich and poor, the idea that politics is a game and truth a tool. The media spun. Allies deflected. Enemies cheered. But Traoré remained steady. For him, this was no cause for celebration. It was a warning shot. Because if even the oldest democracies were willing to distort truth for power, then what example remained for the world? And what hope remained for justice? The breaking point came when Traoré addressed his own cabinet, not about Burkina Faso but about Washington. The room was tense. Advisors expected a formal briefing, perhaps a warning to tread carefully with American partners. But instead, Traoré placed a single headline on the table. Intelligence was politicized to target Trump, Gabbard claims. He looked around the room not as a president, but as a soldier who had lived through lies dressed as policy. Then he spoke. What we are witnessing in America is not new. It is not surprising. But it is dangerous. He paused. Because when the world's most powerful nation begins to hide its political battles behind classified files and fabricated threats, then no truth is safe. And no people are free. One minister shifted in his seat. Another glanced nervously at the American flag in the corner. Traoré pointed to it. They told us they were the example, he said. They told us that justice lives there, that power answers to law. But today their own intelligence was used like a weapon, not a shield. And no one has been arrested. No one has stood trial. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The question is not what America did, he continued. The question is, what do we do when the mask of democracy slips, and we see the empire underneath? That moment, quiet, electric, undeniable, was the turning point. Not because Traore was condemning the United States, but because he was revealing something deeper. That the cancer of illegality in politics is not a regional issue, it is global. And it is growing. If the architects of democracy can lie, if the guardians of intelligence can fabricate, if law itself can be bent to suit a party's need, then every citizen everywhere has reason to watch their own leaders, and wonder, who protects the people from the protectors? That evening, long after his cabinet had left, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his office. The city of Ouagadougou buzzed faintly in the distance. A fan spun overhead. The document from Tulsi Gabbard still sat on his desk, not as a political item but as a symbol. He reread it not for information but for meaning. What did it mean for a world where truth could be edited? Where justice could be delayed, or denied, by those in power? He wasn't thinking only about Trump or Gabbard, Obama or the CIA. He was thinking about the millions who would never know their names, but would feel the impact of what they had done. And undone. He remembered the men in his own country, who once used foreign intelligence to name enemies. He remembered the journalists imprisoned for revealing facts, the students shot for raising questions, the mothers who received no answers, only silence and a sealed report. And now the so-called free world was doing the same. Traore picked up a pen and wrote 3 words on the bottom of the paper. No one exempt. Not America. Not France. Not Burkina Faso. Because the crisis wasn't about political sides. It was about a system that rewards manipulation and punishes honesty. Traore would later speak to his people about this moment. He would tell them, if the strongest nations abandon truth, it is not a reason for us to follow. It is a warning for us to stand taller. Because once intelligence becomes a weapon, democracy becomes a casualty. His words echoed beyond Africa. They were shared in classrooms in Ghana, tweeted in French from Dakar, and debated on podcasts in New York. Some called him bold. Others called him reckless. But for those who still believed that politics could serve people, not betray them, Traore had become something else. A voice that refused to whisper. A leader who understood that in this age, the real revolution isn't always in the streets. Sometimes it's in the refusal to lie. Subscribe to African Revolutionary Lens, where the truth doesn't wear a party badge and the people come first.